Next, I'll discuss speaker systems. Speakers, there are hundreds of manufacturers of speakers, and each manufacturer makes dozens, if not multiple dozens, of different types of speakers for different applications. There are thousands of speakers to choose from. In regards to your speakers, I would suggest that it be the one component that you not cheap out on, right? If you're going to invest more money in one component versus another, I think that your speaker system needs to be where you actually put some serious time and consideration. It is the device that turns electrical energy back into acoustic energy, and the more clearly and accurately that can be done, the better sounding the system. Now, in our little basic diagram that I have here, you'll note that I have actually added a speaker. This is called a monitor speaker, and a monitor speaker is used to provide sound back to a performer, right? And we'll talk about it a little more in a little more detail later on. Right now, let's just start talking about how a speaker works. Right? So a speaker is an output transducer, and it is the exact reverse technology of a microphone. There is a magnet and a winding of wire, and when I apply voltage around that wire, it moves a cone forward and back, which actually reproduces sound waves in the air by compressing the sound waves. And you can see in this cutaway, there is typically a diaphragm, which is used to push the air. And then there is the coil of wire, and then the magnet that it works against. Now, speakers do a lot of different things, and there are full range speakers. Speakers that reproduce all frequencies. It's in a cone speaker, it can often be identified by this little cone that's inside of the larger cone. This speaker is trying to reproduce all of the frequencies of the audible spectrum, and unfortunately it's not that good at doing that. If you think about the low rumbling frequencies of bass and then the high and the squeaks that happen in the higher range, even a full range speaker is not good at reproducing the full range of sound. It's deficient on the low end, it's deficient on the high end, and often can be characterized as kind of tinny. If you think about the micro or the speakers that are a part of your phone, right? Your phone, if you're trying to listen to that thumping bass, it's not very good at it. And trying to get the really high frequencies out of your phone speakers, it's not that good either. That is an example of a full range speaker. Here is a little breakdown of some of the common sounds that we would find across the sound spectrum. So those really low thumping bass sounds. And then there's musical bass, like a bass guitar or a kick drum or an upright bass. And then there is the what is considered the upper bass, right, which would be the low end of a vocal register, right, maybe the lowest end of a male voice. Then there's this mid-range, and that's where most things live. The voices live here, and most instruments, the bulk of the piano range lives here. This is by way and far the widest spectrum, and what most sounds live in this 200 to 3,000 hertz range. Up from about 3,500 hertz, 4,000 hertz is where you get triangles and cymbals and that sound, where sibilants sometimes. So that's the treble side of things. So if our full range speaker is not very good at producing all the sound, what we've come up with, or people have, not me, have come up with, is a way to make it a two-way speaker system. So we now take speakers and specialize them. So we have a tweeter that is capable of producing high frequencies. It's really good at doing high frequencies. And then a woofer, which is better at doing low and low mid frequencies. And if we look at the graphs of this, we'll see that you can see where the two speakers sort of cross over in the middle. The tweeter is good at this upper range, and the woofer slash mid-range is better at the low frequencies. And if we look at the spectral graph down here, you'll see that the woofer is actually doing the lion's share of the work, or a lot of the work. It's covering all the way down into this bass register, all the way up through the vocal range, and then it's just those higher frequencies, starting at 1,000, going up to that 35 to 4,000 area, and then beyond is what the tweeter is providing. So this is great, and this was a wonderful improvement on our full range speaker, but we can specialize our speakers even more. We can come up with a three-way speaker or a tri-amp speaker that then has a tweeter, a mid-range, and a woofer. So now we've really specialized our output, and so that the woofer is only responsible for the low frequencies, the mid-range is only responsible for this little vocal area, and then the tweeter again is just doing that high pass stuff, right? So this speaker might all be plugged into one, and we use a device known as a crossover. And a crossover sorts the frequencies. It separates the frequencies. By applying power to a crossover, it will only allow the high frequencies to go to the tweeter and the mid frequencies. It separates where the frequencies go in the circuitry, and I'm not going to get into that circuitry. All right, now we can go ahead and even break this down a little more into something known as a subwoofer. Even a woofer that might go up to 150 or 250 hertz is not as efficient at producing those really low, strong, rumbling sounds that you've really grown to love in your music. So subwoofers have been introduced to produce specifically those sounds, the really low frequencies, 20 hertz, that's the sounds that you feel deep in your chest, right? And so they live typically in the 160s, 170s, and below. The full range speakers, or the combination of the woofer and the mid horns, live in the middle here, and then the tweeters pick up at the top. Subwoofers can be huge. These cabinets over here may be 2 feet in diameter each. This is a very, very large speaker. And if you think about it, it's just trying to move a lot of air at a very low frequency. And this is an example where we have our tweeter, our high-end speaker, right? We have a mid-range or a woofer. This is a two-way speaker right here. And then below that is just a group of subwoofers that are designed to do nothing but push a bunch of air, and I'll show you what I'm talking about, right? So those are subwoofers, and that's how much they can move, right, as they try and produce these really low frequencies, right? And you can just see how powerful they are, and they require tremendous amounts of power from the amplifier. Okay, so as we start to think about setting up our main system, right? So now we'll actually even separate our amplifiers. We can separate the amplifiers and put our crossover, which is separating frequencies. So now our amplifiers are only responsible for producing a specific range of frequencies. So an amplifier is only responsible for producing the high frequencies in the top part of this speaker. A mid-range amplifier only produces the mid-range frequencies, and a subwoofer amplifier is only producing the ultra-low frequencies. It allows that amplifier to concentrate exclusively on the frequencies it's trying to make louder. This is called a tri-amp system. Sometimes there's just a bi-amp system, but we're actually specializing our amplifiers to deliver the exact frequencies that we want for our speaker system. And I'll go ahead and pause here, and I'll see you again shortly.